Hello, History of Sexuality students. This is Professor Bowen here. I hope that you're all doing okay. I just wanted to spend some time addressing a few of the questions that came out of our Week 13 discussion about the history of sexual reassignment surgery in modern Iran. With the wonderful historian Afsana NAJMABADI as our guide, we learned about the rise and fall and re-emergence of sex change operations across the 20th and 21st centuries in Iran. And as we saw, NAJMABADI is very much opposed to the argument that the Iranian state's support of sexual reassignment surgery, or SRS, today is part of some governmental attempt to eliminate homosexuals from society. That is actually the assumption she was working with when she began her research, but it is not where she ended up. After talking to trans individuals, to some of the doctors who perform these surgeries, and to some of the governmental officials who regulate access to SRS, NAJMABADI came to believe that rather than being about the erasing of a particular sexual group, SRS is productive. That is, it brings into being new forms of sexual identity which sit alongside homosexuality instead of replacing it. Many of us wanted to know more about this. How did NAJMABADI come to this argument, and how valid is her interpretation of the data that she collected and analyzed? To many people, both inside and outside of Iran, SRS seems quite obviously to be a heteronormative technology that is designed to quote-unquote cure gays and lesbians by forcing them into traditional gender and sex roles. So why doesn't NAJMABADI think that this is the case? What was the evidence that led her to a very different conclusion? In what follows, I'd like to talk about this a bit more and, along the way, hopefully address some of the questions on the screen here that you have all asked. So, is SRS all about eliminating homosexuality by forcing all non-normative men and women into a transsexual, cisgender straitjacket? In order to address this question, one of the first things that NAJMABADI did was talk to Iranians themselves, and in particular to trans men and women. How do people come to understand themselves as trans, and not as some other kind of category or identity, like homosexual? In her research, NAJMABADI came to see that in Iran today, sexual identity is not really believed to be something internal. Sexuality is not seen as a fixed essence at the core of one's personality. Rather, most Iranians view it in relational and situational terms. Instead of being constructed in a self-referential fashion, identity is arrived at through situational conduct in different kinds of social settings. That is to say, when people decide whether they are gay or trans, they do this not by way of reference to an inner psychic self, but by figuring themselves out through relationships with others. Indeed, they often discover who they are when others point it out to them. As an example of this, consider Mehran, a male-to-female trans person who narrated her own journey of self-discovery to NAJMABADI as follows. I'm not going to read this rather lengthy excerpt to you, but you should peruse it for yourself to get a sense of what this process of self-discovery is all about. Social effects, in other words, matter quite a lot. Being trans or gay is not about inner feelings finding a name. In Iran, the process of coming to recognize that we are trans is a gradual one. It's something that often involves a lot of other possible social roles, including homosexuality. As evidence of this, let's consider some more testimony. These are some remarks from one of NAJMABADI'S other informants, a person whose name is Hori. And again, because this is rather long, I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, but this would be a good opportunity to pause the screen, stop for a minute, and go through it yourself. So hopefully in these examples, we can see some evidence for NAJMABADI'S point about how being trans does not simply mean the erasure of gays and lesbians from society. SRS is not simply the quote-unquote solution to the quote-unquote problem that is same-sex desire and same-sex sexual relationships. However, it does appear that for at least some of NAJMABADI'S interviewees, the proclamation, "I'm a transsexual, not a homosexual," does seem to stem from some negative, stigmatized views of same-sex sexual desire. Some people appear to reject the label gay or lesbian because they believe that homosexuality is despicable. At times, it might be the case that the negative connotations surrounding homosexuality, which I should note is illegal in Iran, push people with non-normative desires toward the category of trans. For example, one MTF trans person in her early 30s recalled the following after hearing about this in school. Quote, "I thought I was gay, and though at first I didn't exactly know what it meant, I thought it meant a man with feminine feelings. When I heard more explanations, and that we are also called same-sex player or same-sex desirer, I hated these words. I became familiar with these concepts through the news or conversations with people like myself. For instance, I heard that Elton John was gay, that he is a man who has sex with men. This thought really tortured me. The other word that really tormented me was Ivakavar. In our neighborhood, there was this guy known as Ali Koshgila. He was killed, perhaps by his father or someone else, I don't know. When I was around 19, I heard about transsexuals, but there was no clear concept about it." So, things are fairly complex. Having read NAJMABADI'S book, one of the things I kept wondering about was why some gays and lesbians identify in this way instead of identifying as transsexual. And this is not something that NAJMABADI really looks into that much. Professing Selves, her book, focuses on trans people, and NAJMABADI is interested in understanding why people see themselves as trans instead of as gay. But I think if we look at things from the other side around, that is, if we look at people who resolve this question by saying that they're gay and not trans, I think we'd get maybe a more complete understanding of the extent to which homophobia fits into all of this. But to move on. In addition to interviewing trans people, NAJMABADI also interviewed doctors, particularly those who are in charge of determining whether or not applicants for SRS will be able to legally call themselves trans. In a medical sense, the production of transsexuality within Iran today happens at places like the Tehran Psychiatric Institute, where doctors meet with applicants and talk with them for a period of about 4 to 6 months to determine if they are really transsexual. At the end of this period of psychotherapy, results are sent to the Legal Medical Organization of Iran, which makes the final decision. This is the body that approves or denies requests for SRS and for legal change of identity documents. Those who get approved get a legal document that authorizes hormonal treatment and SRS, in addition to things like basic health insurance, financial assistance, exemption from military service, for MTFs anyway, and, of course, name changes. In talking with these individuals, that is, these doctors, NAJMABADI learned that there's actually a lot of debate about how one differentiates a transsexual from a gay person or someone with a gender identity disorder. One might expect that because homosexuality is illegal, doctors might push men and women with same-sex desires to undergo SRS, but that does not appear to be the case. According to Dr. Hamid Farzadi, who works at the Tehran Psychiatric Institute, Such a thing is rare in Tehran. Here is what he told NAJMABADI. All of this serves to counter any rigid notion of how the Islamic State deals with transsexuality. Identification is problematic, and there are lots of disputes about what makes someone trans or gay. Often, when trying to figure these things out, doctors turn to other transsexuals to determine if a particular applicant qualifies. Thus, the goal does not appear to be eliminating homosexuality. It is more complex than that. As evidence, consider another one of NAJMABADI'S informants, a psychiatric intern at Ruzbeh Hospital named Farshid Takizadeh. After conducting research on the differences between homosexuality and transsexuality, he came to the following conclusion, and I'll read you this one because it is shorter. Quote, "Homosexuality is not a deviation. It is very normal. It is deep in our genes. Since 2002, I have studied 250 true homosexuals. I did several kinds of psychological tests, and I have the results showing that these people do not suffer from sexual deviation. We need to diagnose properly so that homosexuals are not sent to SRS. Families need to learn that they ought to support their trans and homosexual children." So I hope this provides some useful additional information. I hope that it clears up some of the questions that we had about this. Of course, there's a lot more to discuss because this has become quite a hot topic of late for historians and other kinds of social scientists studying sexuality in the Iranian context. So, if you have further questions or if you want more information, please feel free to get in touch with me, however works best for you. If not, I will see you in our Week 14 discussion forum. I'm really looking forward to going closer and closer to the end of the semester with you this week. Bye-bye for now.